celebrating celebrating the accomplishments of our 2020-2021 fellows. It's been a difficult year working through the pandemic and everything else that happened last year. And so today we want to celebrate all their hard work and highlight some of their accomplishments. So we'll be going through each fellow's presentation, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end of each presentation. So feel free to unmute yourself or chat us in the chat box. Okay, so without much further ado, we can get started. Okay, so up first we have Claire Leone.
Hi, I'm Claire. So for the past 11 months, I've been working with the City of Beverly Hills' Public Works Department on 3 different sustainability initiatives, one of them of which is a single-use plastic ban throughout the city. And so my project began with research. Researching other bans in other cities, counties, states, and even other countries to determine language and different ways of implementation, as well as identifying stakeholders. So from that, I developed an implementation plan and a full phased-in draft ordinance, of which the first phase was an upon request and mandatory reusable cutlery for dine-in customers. So when you go into a restaurant, they can't provide you with single-use disposables. And then the second phase was single-use plastics were banned, and alternatives must be compostable, made of plant fiber. And so from there, we engaged stakeholders, one of which was the Assistant Director of the Public Works Department, as well as the Public Works Commission. And from there, we determined that with COVID-19, the health hazard, as well as the economic hardship of the business community, especially the restaurant community, it wasn't a good time for the full-on ordinance. But from there, we decided to go forward with the first phase and create a standalone ordinance instead. So completely separating the two. So you can see in my little diagram there, the arrows point back to basically going back and revising. So from the stakeholder engagement, we went back to the drawing board and started researching just the upon request ordinance to get more specific language and just get more into the nitty gritty. So from there, developed a new proposed ordinance and engaged stakeholders again. And this time we took it to the commission, as well as reaching out directly to food service establishments, the business community, and residents. And we did this through different surveys. We had 3 different community meetings, and I helped develop flyers, a fact sheet, Instagram posts, and printed media. And so from there also, we conducted outreach and education to field staff who would basically go into these businesses and restaurants to educate them, inform them, and just help them and provide resources for them for complying with the future ordinance. And we reached out to business owners for them to educate their employees if they're going out for lunch during their lunch break. Maybe bring your own reusable cutlery, since they won't automatically be provided to them anymore. We developed outreach materials for specifically to employees at these food service establishments, as well as customers. And so from there, we're able to provide resources for business owners. And how I've done this is developing an extensive alternatives list of compostable alternatives to conventional single-use plastic items like forks, spoons, knives, and clamshells, which will be in the second phase. But I help provide the city with the second phase, which they can implement once the hardship of COVID-19 and the health concern has subsided, as well as developing a website and specifically a web page for the cutlery upon request ordinance. And from there, you can see there were several obstacles along the way. Of course, the impact of COVID-19 on the business community, particularly food service establishments. So even though our initial plans of developing a full-on ordinance, it worked out because the first phase will be hopefully implemented by the end of the summer. And then the city is provided with the more extensive full ordinance for whenever the timing is better. And another obstacle faced is the lack of regulation of what constitutes alternatives as compostable. There's a lot of greenwashing on the market, as I'm sure everyone knows. So determining what alternatives are actually compostable, which we determine plant fiber. As well as the hesitancies of switching to sustainable alternatives. Of course, in the business community, there is some apprehension there. So for next steps, the city will assist food service establishments through those field staff with complying with the upon request ordinance, as well as continuous, education, ensuring compliance of the new ordinance once it is adopted. And preparing the business community, residents, and Beverly Hills customers for the future citywide full-on plastic ordinance. And yes, once the economic burden of COVID-19 is minimized, begin phasing in the full plastic ordinance, and educate and engage stakeholders for the full ordinance. As well as with the alternatives list, things are constantly changing, being improved, new technologies are being developed. So to continuously research and identify new sustainable alternatives to conventional single-use plastics. And that was the last 11 months.
Great, thank you, and congratulations, Claire. And thank you so much for your service this year. That's really exciting to hear that you were still able to, make progress despite all the protections you had to put in place during COVID. Awesome. So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to unmute yourself and ask a question or just share some congrats for Claire, now would be a time that you can do that.
One question. You mentioned one of the obstacles was determining what was compostable. So I'm curious if you are allowing compostable plastics in the stream or if that's part of the ban also.
Yeah, that's definitely the tricky gray area of compostable products. So we sort of have a tier of, as of right now, we have a tier of, the best alternative down to kind of the lowest. So we are educating them that bioplastics can't really be composted in commercial facilities, or that's a whole other can of worms, is the commercial facilities, but they can't really be backyard compostable. So that's our first and foremost is trying to find something that essentially you could throw in the backyard or in your backyard compost and have it compost within the 140 days. But we do have lists with bioplastics as well as high recyclable plastics and post-consumer recycled as well.
Awesome, thank you. Great presentation.
Great. Well, thank you again, Claire. So now we'll move on to hearing from Brendan Norton, who was serving with the city of Cupertino.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. I'm Brendan. I'm a recent graduate from Cal Poly SLO with a degree in city regional planning. And I've been serving remotely from my hometown, Stockton, California, with the city of Cupertino. I was tasked with supporting outreach for the city of Cupertino's climate action plan with an emphasis on equity as well as zero waste initiatives. And this was my first real introduction to the climate space. And it has been incredibly insightful working with these climate professionals at Cupertino, and I'm grateful for the staff who have mentored me and dedicated their time to me. Around 70% of my time was dedicated to supporting CAP initiatives and around 30% towards zero waste. Although I ended up doing more on the waste side through my volunteer engagement project. So diving into some tasks completed, a bit of a background. Some of you might be familiar with SB 1000, which is, or the Environmental Justice Bill, which is one of the best toolkits for advancing equity in local government. And I presented this to planning staff at Cupertino. On the waste side, Cupertino's Environmental Programs Division seeks to adopt a single-use plastics ordinance, and some of my research involved looking for other examples of zero waste plans in SVCE cities. And what specific goals and action items could be applicable to Cupertino. As many of you know, 1383 is a hot topic, and the city is looking for solutions to meet 75% reduction in food waste by 2025. So some of my research included looking at tier 1 and tier 2 waste generators and identifying what those are within the city, which ones we needed to reach out to. I also was able to participate in an analysis of Cupertino's municipal fleet data to prepare for fleet electrification. And that was a partnership with the city of Fremont and this electrification company called Optiny. Some challenges we faced, obviously working remotely on outreach efforts primarily has been difficult. Virtual outreach has posed a challenge during the service year. We knew that we needed to take on a consultant to do the technical and outreach aspects of some of the CAP work. So I was supporting that throughout the months of December and January. And just in the last 3 months, I was able to conduct outreach that more aligns with my GAP goals. And so I'm grateful for being able to conduct that outreach. Despite this setback, we've still been able to achieve some notable outcomes. Some of these outcomes include a virtual Earth Day event. I co-wrote the script for this event, and this was broadcasted live on YouTube. We had over 300 attendees view this event, and it included pre-recorded videos from a number of different stakeholders and advocacy groups in the community. My outreach efforts with the student-run environmental group YEPI led to an 18% increase in the number of households signed up with our climate challenge dashboard, which tracks the amount of money you would save from compiling with these climate change actions you can take in your household. Our first stakeholder workshop was held last month, and we successfully engaged members of the community through that. I'll elaborate a little bit more on these equity trainings that I completed to staff. And I also completed a vulnerability index using equity indexes and looking at key census tracts within Cupertino. I did want to highlight my volunteer engagement project, which was a partnership with some of the other fellows in this session. It was titled Clean City, Green City, and it was a month-long cleanup that ran throughout the month of April. Some of our project partners included the City of Cupertino, Signal Hill, and Climate Reality Project chapters. And we engaged 120 volunteers with over 200 hours of volunteer time. A lot more successful than we anticipated, and we received a lot of positive feedback from volunteers who enjoyed that they were able to conduct the cleanup whenever they wanted and wherever they wanted. And that was a really popular idea. Next slide, please. I did want to highlight this Cupertino's zoning map. I often referenced this as I was developing the vulnerability index and just paying attention to certain census tracts that were more at risk to pollution or tracts of low affordability. As we know, a lot of equity and health concerns are interconnected with land use. So my hope is that as the city continues identifying ways to infill and stressing housing affordability and greater transit access, that those are aligned with Cupertino's CAP goals. Next slide. One final project I also wanted to mention, which was a big project for me, was the USDN equity trainings. The Urban Sustainability Directors Network provides these equity trainings for local government. And these focus on topics like implicit and explicit biases, how to communicate about equity, how to implement equity in agencies. This was presented to sustainability staff. I also received a lot of positive feedback from staff on this. I was able to utilize a few different engagement tools and make recommendations for what future trainings could look like in Cupertino to more staff members. So I'd just like to thank the folks at LGC for providing sessions throughout this service year on mental health, professional development. We just had our career fair last week, and that was really helpful. I've really enjoyed getting to know other fellows and learn from their experiences. And I'm planning on prioritizing equity in my next few positions. I'm currently in the interview process for a few environmental planning positions. So I'm really grateful for this experience, and thank you again.
Great, thank you for that, Brendan, and we definitely appreciate your service as a fellow for this year and all the great work you've done for the city of Cupertino. Any questions from the audience at this time?
Is it okay for the site supervisor to ask a question?
Absolutely.
Hi, Brendan. I couldn't resist. I was watching your presentation and just wondered, you just struck me how many different types of virtual engagement tools you worked with. As you mentioned, being in lockdown was, big struggle trying to put forward all these outreach efforts. If you were going to take one or two of these virtual methods into your next step, even if you could do in person, what do you think that would be?
I remember one session we had from our equity trainings was this script reading where we kind of did like a bit of a role play where you choose a character and you read the lines and you kind of put yourself in that person's shoes. And that was really, really powerful for the purpose of an equity training to kind of understand what another person's point of view was. So I think maybe adopting that moving forwards in other types of engagement processes would be really, really neat.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, great question. Any other questions from the audience?
I have one. 300 attendees for an Earth Day speaking event is really impressive. How did you reach out to all of them? How did you get so many people engaged?
We were really lucky to have a really robust like technical and video team at Cupertino, and they managed to do all of the like day of live scheduling for the. They had to tie in all the pre-recorded videos that we wanted together, and then we had people do the live narration in between each video. And I think we really advertised the event far enough in advance, and then it's like a big tradition too at Cupertino, and so I think we had a lot of people who attended last year and knew that we were having one this year virtually, and just were naturally wanting to see it. And then also I remember we got some like international attention from people in different countries who were like tuned in because it was like a free video you could see online being on YouTube. So that also helped.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Brendan, and best of luck with your next steps. Great. So next up, we have Dominique Dashwood, who served with the city of Encinitas.
Thank you for the introduction, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to be here presenting alongside all of my co-fellows and seeing all the great work that everyone's accomplished over the course of the service year. Today, I'll be talking to you about my project all about zero waste. I'm serving my second year at the City of Encinitas in the Public Works Department. So the City of Encinitas' Climate Action Plan, which was adopted in 2018, calls for the implementation of a citywide zero waste program with a goal of reducing residents' waste generation to 3 pounds per person per day by 2030. And then aligning with these zero waste goals, State Law SB 1383 requires the city to offer curbside organics collection for recycling to all residents and businesses, among some other requirements related to food waste and organic waste. So between SB 1383 and the city's climate action plan, my project was focused on conducting outreach on the city's new organics recycling program, which launched on June 1st, and just general zero waste programs and initiatives that we have going on. So for outreach and education, I utilized a wide variety of strategies. As previously mentioned, due to COVID, we were restricted a lot to virtual engagement. So very heavily on social media, email newsletters, revamping the website, distributing flyers. And then I also worked to coordinate with our consultants who are doing outreach and education work. A couple examples I wanted to touch on, some of my favorite outreach and education things I did with the Encinitas Union School District. We hosted the 3rd annual pumpkin composting event after Halloween, where students could drop off their moldy pumpkins. And we were able to divert over 370 pumpkins from the landfill. And this is the greenhouse gas equivalent of 230 gallons of gasoline being burned. So it was a great success. Only downfall was there was a little bit of gross pumpkin juice in my car after the fact, having to drive it around town. Another example, in order to connect with the hard to reach in the community, those without internet access and the Spanish speakers, we provided over 700 bilingual flyers to the local food pantries in Encinitas, and they were able to add these flyers to their food distribution programs and share information with them about the organics program, about the potential rate increases, and just share some more resources with them. And then switching gears away from outreach and education, one other thing I wanted to mention that I worked on this year was a reusable takeout container pilot program. So my site supervisor and I, we realized throughout the pandemic how much single-use plastic waste was being generated by all of these takeout meals. So a solution to this was a reusable takeout container program. So we ordered some materials. You can see an image of the container down there on the bottom right. And we found a restaurant to partner with, developed a program outline for them, and they just rolled it out a few weeks ago. So right now we're in the trial period and trying to recruit some more restaurants to get on board with the pilot program and just continue reducing that single-use plastic waste in the community. And then next, I wanted to show you all some examples of outreach and education work that I did. If you go to the next slide, please. So on zero waste, I'll just go through all these images on top left. So an Instagram post, did a lot of those. It was a great way to get far reach in the community. A screen grab from the website that we launched and revamped and just filled with resources for residents and businesses. The bottom left is an image of the pumpkin composting event. And on the right top is the schedule from our virtual Earth Week celebration. We partnered with a handful of local environmental organizations and were able to highlight the work that they were doing as well. And then the bottom right is a screenshot from an interview we did with a local resident who owns a zero waste shop, and she gave us a tour as part of the zero waste portion of the event. So that was nice to share with residents. And then on the next slide, I have examples of the specific work I did on organics recycling. I have an example of the 3-stream signage I created with the waste hauler and our consultants for businesses and getting their organics programs started. Bottom left, another Instagram post. It was great to see residents being really excited and eager to get on board with the program and start collecting their kitchen scraps. And then on the right, just another flyer, just more information for residents, how to ease that transition of collecting scraps in their kitchen and get over the ick factor. Some people were a little concerned with the grossness, but we we helped and provide a lot of resources to ease that transition. And that concludes everything that I wanted to touch on today. I'm happy to answer any questions. And then again, just thank you to Civic Spark. It's been a great couple of years, and I couldn't have asked for a better experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Dominique. That's so exciting. Awesome. So I have a question. So what's kind of the process for folks who have the reusable containers to bring them back? Or is there some kind of like reward system? Like every time you bring it back, you get a point. Once you get so many points, you get a free something. I don't know.
That's a great idea to incorporate a reward system, but just our initial basic idea was they pay $5 to sign up for the program. They get to take the container home, they bring it back, the restaurant washes, sanitizes it, and then they can get their next meal in it. But I really like your idea of incorporating kind of a points reward system, and maybe that's something to add later down the line.
Great, thank you. Is there any other questions from our audience? Okay, well, congratulations, Dominique, for completing your second year of Civic Spark, and I'm really excited for your next steps, and best of luck, and thank you again.
Thanks, Katie.
Okay, so next up, we have Jasmine Krause, who also served with the city of Encinitas.
Great, thank you, Katie. So yeah, I'm Jasmine, and I have also been serving in the city of Encinitas. It has been such an honor to get to serve with Civic Spark and to work alongside all of these other amazing fellows who are doing such great work. My work in particular centered on the city of Encinitas' Climate Action Plan, or their CAP. Specifically, I did a lot of outreach and reporting, and today I'm focusing in on that reporting component. So the city's CAP sets out 20 measures under 7 large strategies to reach their greenhouse gas reduction goals. And so in order to ensure that they're going to meet those goals and stay on track, the city, through their Civic Spark Fellow, produces an annual report every year. This is basically looking at key metrics that are tracking implementation progress. This plays a really important role externally to make sure that the public can sort of get a window into what their city employees are doing, especially things that are sort of behind the scenes that they might not realize are happening even within the city that are still really important to greenhouse gas mitigation. And then internally, this is a really important sort of status update to different employees in various sort of roles about which CAP measures are on track and what might need more attention. So in terms of deliverables, the annual reports themselves were published. Due to timing of data, I came in and sort of had the tail end of the 2019 report with just a couple pieces to finalize and then publish, and then began preparation for the 2020 report. So doing all the data collection and drafting for that, which won't be published until the next fellow comes in, and then they'll pick it up and finish that. I've also updated the city's climate action webpage, and we'll update our interactive climate dashboard with that data so that citizens can go on and actually see the data that's going into the report and sort of get a deeper look into what we're doing. In addition to this, I created a spreadsheet this year that just centralizes all the data that's being tracked so that it's easy to grasp when you're doing quality control, when you get the data, if everything's on track. And also just makes it easier for handling the graphs that go into the report and the website. So the sort of process for data review, beginning with sort of looking at what last year's data looks like and what you need for this year, and ending with publishing it on our website, begins, with reviewing data and making any updates to that collection process. So if there was a new measure implemented, making sure that you've sort of incorporated who you're going to need to contact for that, what data pieces you need, then sending out data requests and following up on those data requests. Sometimes you don't hear back quite quick enough, or there's been a misunderstanding with which piece of data to get. So making sure to really stay on top of that and have really clear communication is very important. Then you perform quality control and analysis on all the data and information you receive, making sure everything looks right, that it is the data that you asked for, really important. And then entering all that data in the spreadsheet so that in future years, fellows can look back and make sure that they know what the data was for these past years, and then it's all on track. Once you have that data and information, you can draft the updates for the climate dashboard, and then my site supervisor reviews those updates, make sure that everything looks good, that we're not missing any really important accomplishments for the year, and then those get published to the climate dashboard. So naturally, out of this process, the next steps will be for the next fellow to finalize and publish the 2020 annual report. Most of that data should already be up on the dashboard, so it should be a pretty seamless process to finalize that. And then ensuring that with each year, new data is being entered into the spreadsheet, anticipating need for data collection for any new measures. So if a measure is going to go into effect, it's going to require someone to really dig through a lot of building permits. It's a lot easier for everyone if you can sort of see that in advance, and when the ordinance goes into effect, begin data collection, rather than retroactively at the end of the year, needing to look back and scramble. So that's a really important role. And then, yeah, just continuing the yearly data collection, analysis, and reporting. So if you could go to the next slide, Katie. These are just some of the public-facing deliverables to sort of put a face to the name. So on the right, we have the actual annual report that was published for 2019. So very centralized document. So if someone wants to learn about all of the measures and everything the city's doing, they can go to this document and read, get an in-depth picture of what's been happening. On the left top, we have the city's climate action webpage. So there's a summary of the annual report. There's also details on the actual CAP itself and other important projects regarding it. So this really serves to centralize and really put all the communications around the CAP and reporting in one place. And then from the bottom, there's a screenshot from our interactive climate dashboard. So it breaks it down into smaller categories, lets people go through and actually click on the data, interact with the graphs, and sort of see what's happening. And that is everything from me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay. Well, I just want to say congratulations to you, Jasmine and Dominique, both serving the city of Encinitas. And I just have a question about your work on the website and kind of how that process went. And was there a consultant there with the graphic design, or were you guys kind of responsible for the overall look of how it turned out?
Yeah, so our climate dashboard is run by consultants behind the scenes, but we do almost all of the updates, coding the graphs, putting those in. We've designed a lot of the images too, because I think sometimes it's easier for us to just pick up the work and do it ourselves. But we did have consultant support if we weren't sure about something.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from anyone in the audience in the chat box, or if you can unmute yourself? We have a lot of congratulations for you, Jasmine. Okay, well, we'll just move along to our next presenter. Another senior fellow serving with the city of Signal Hill. We have Nasreen Syed.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nasreen, and I'm a second-year fellow with Civic Spark. It has been such an honor to serve another term alongside you and former fellows. I formerly served with the City of Los Angeles Sheriff Department, developing resource management plans for them to be more green and sustainable. This year, I served at the City of Signal Hill's Public Works Department on projects designed to assist the city to comply with new upcoming organics mandates related to emissions reduction and waste management. So specifically, I led the waste management initiative by developing and advancing a program focused on organics recycling and community outreach and education in compliance with the upcoming SB 1383 regulations. I supported my beneficiaries by reviewing legislation, connecting with stakeholders, developing program material and educational content, and providing education to community members about organics recycling, thereby increasing their resilience capacity by developing resources that helped my beneficiaries to implement more effective, efficient, and sustainable practices. Some of the outcomes of my service term with the City of Signal Hill included, I developed a comprehensive organic ordinance, which was consistent with the SB 1383 regulation. This aspect of the service term was most challenging because CalRecycle had not finalized the regulations until December of 2020. So we were basically working with an unfinalized regulation for a small portion of the service term. 2 electronic annual reports were completed and submitted to CalRecycle to showcase our progress in implementing AB 341 and 1826 and our plans for SB 1383. Also, I conducted several education and outreach events, including presentations to City Council, Sustainable Cities Committees, and the Chamber of Commerce, and the commercial food generators within the jurisdiction to inform them about SB 1383 and what are the requirements from them going forward. Another activity that advanced my agency's goal of raising awareness on waste management was the Mayor's Cleanup, which was in partnership with the Clean City, Green City Volunteer Engagement Initiative. And Brandon also mentioned that I partnered up with Brandon and a few other fellows on today's call. So the Mayor's Cleanup mobilized volunteers to participate in a citywide cleanup and included a webinar on the impacts of waste, including waste on our environment and climate change. I also developed an edible food recovery toolbox, which was published on the city's website to assist commercial food generators with recycling food waste and donating excess edible food. Finally, several articles were produced for the City Views newsletter regarding organics recycling to educate and inform residents of the upcoming legislation. An article was also published in the local newspaper. Going forward, the next steps for the City of Signal Hill is to present the ordinance to the City Council and implement the ordinance by September of 2021 and provide residents with new collecting bins for organics because the city already has a bin for trash and recycling. We did have discussions around new adjusted trash rates, and they were presented to City Council 2 weeks ago, and that is currently going through a Prop 218 hearing as we speak, and will be posted once residents vote on it. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I have some examples of the outreach that we did, including the news and the City Views articles. You can also see that I have a brochure for edible food recovery on there. And then we did some outreach for SB 341 and 1826. And then there's presentations, screenshots of the presentations that I did for City Council and the Sustainable Cities Committee. That's it for me. I would like to thank everyone for attending this session, and I'm truly grateful to all Civic Spark staff and my beneficiaries for providing me with this enriching opportunity.
Thank you. Great job, Naz. And thank you for completing 2 years of service with Civic Spark. You definitely made an impact and were a leader to other fellows. Great. Do we have any questions from the audience about Nazreen's project?
Nazreen, I have a quick question. I know that it sounds like the majority of your project was focused on organics, but I'm curious to know, in addition to working on organics, how you and your agency adapted to large amounts of single-use materials entering the waste stream as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The City of Signal Hill was pretty much really aware of the single-use street plastic entering, but they can't really do much about it. First of all, because a lot of the Signal Hill is such a small city and a lot of the businesses were impacted by COVID-19. And therefore, it was also very challenging for us to speak about SB 1383 at City Council meetings or when we were doing outreach, because there's a lot of opposition from businesses because they are still recovering from the impact of COVID-19. And based on our new trash rates for the commercial sector, the prices went up about 80%. per month. So yes.
That sounds like a challenging policy to implement.
It is, it certainly is.
Yeah, definitely a lot of challenges with waste and in the midst of a pandemic. But great job being adaptable and great work. So we'll move along to our next presenter, Shannon Casey, who served with the organization Recycle More.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Thanks for that introduction, Katie. I've served 2 years now with Recycle More, which is a local waste management authority in the Bay Area. And they're also responsible for implementing SB 1383. So I feel everyone struggle on that end. Yeah, but part of my project this year has been to focus mainly on education and outreach. Prior to the pandemic, a lot of this education outreach was all done in in-person events, like Earth Day events, trainings, presentations, school composting programs. So once everything was kind of shut down and everyone was working from home, we had to move a lot of that to virtual platforms, like websites, social media. But a lot of our outreach on the virtual end was on an outdated website, which made it really hard to get people to visit it and even update it because it's very 90s-esque. So we're embarking on a new website revamp that should be done at the end of this month. So hopefully I'll get to see it before I leave. And Recycle More, before I started this project, Recycle More pretty much only had a very infrequently used Facebook page. So there wasn't a lot of traffic on that. We only have a few hundred likes on the page, so not many people were seeing it. There wasn't a lot of original content being made and posted. Maybe like once every 2 months or once a month. So part of my project was to create original content. And to do that, I mostly used Canva because it's a really easy to use web-based platform that I'd had experience using in the past. So really enjoyed using that. So I was able to post that on our Facebook page. And once we saw a lot more engagement on Facebook, I was able to make an Instagram, which the agency had not had before. So that's pretty exciting. Still trying to get people to realize that we have one. So that's been another challenge. So we only have about 75 followers right now. So I've been working on that more recently to see what we can do to get more notice out about that, more engagement on that. But to the right, you can see the graph there. I took that from our Facebook analytics. So every time there's a little jump there, that means a new post was made and we're getting more traffic to our page and more people are seeing it through other organizations sharing it or popping up on people's feed. And the large jump you see at the end, this graph goes from about January to the beginning of July. So at the end, you see June, which we had a paid promotion for one of our household hazardous waste events. I created a poster for that that was printed, but it was also posted on our Facebook. And my coworker promoted it. So we got that dark orange shows how many more engagements we got through the paid promotion. I think it was about 3,600 people saw it, which is a lot more than our normal, which is just under 1,000, I think, typically. So that's something to note, that paid promotions really do work if you're trying to get people to see the post or attend an event. So with the future, I hope to expand to other social media platforms. We're looking into Nextdoor right now. That's going to be really helpful when we do have other events like Earth Day. We have several household hazardous waste collection events a year. So that's something we really want to promote and get people to use our free services that we offer. Next thing we want to increase is just posting on a scheduled, regular basis. It's been pretty much just me running the social media. And since this is only part of my project, I really wanted to dedicate more time to it, but time permitted, I did what I could. So yeah, we're hoping to, well, right now we're promoting Plastic Free July. So we usually do about 2 posts a month, but this month we've been trying to do 2 a week so that people, it gets in their brain, like, oh, we need to reduce plastic, we need to reduce plastic. So I think posting more regularly so people see it is going to be a really big improvement with people seeing our page and just thinking more about the waste that they produce. And next, I would like to just use more of the services that these platforms offer, like stories and sharing other agencies in our area, their posts, so that it's just being spread more regionally than just West Contra Costa County. And on the next slide, I have some examples of the outreach that I created this year. One of the first ones I did was sustainable gift wrapping, because it came up during the holidays, and that's a really fun one. Holidays produce so much waste, whether it's food or packaging or gift wrapping. So I wanted to get this on people's radar, that there's reusable options that they can use. The next one, we offer discounts on home composting bins, like worm bins or tumblers. So we actually saw, I think, about a 20% increase after we posted that. So that was really exciting to see. And the next one is our poster for household hazardous waste. Yeah, and the other ones are just some fun topics that we posted for Earth Day. And if you'd like to see more of the examples that I worked on this year, you can find us at West County Recycle More. That's all I have. I will take any questions if you have any.
Awesome. Great work, Shannon. Those posts look just great. I love the Christmas idea. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, do we have any questions from our audience?
Shannon, I'm very curious to know, there's a lot of creativity in here. What were some of your sources for creativity in terms of thinking about different and new ways to connect with your growing audience?
Yeah, I took a lot of cues from other waste management authorities in the area. We have what we call a sister agency in Central Contra Costa. So we were kind of looking to see what they were posting, how often they were doing it, and also Stop Waste too. They're another jurisdiction near us. So just trying to see what other people were doing in the area. And then since I had a little bit of background in waste from the previous service year and my previous position in college, I knew some of the terms like greenwashing, wish cycling, upcycling, all those fun words. So just trying to get the word out there about these niche topics.
Awesome, great. Well, congratulations, Shannon, and best of luck with your future after Civic Spark, and just really proud of all of your accomplishments.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, moving on, we'll hear from Sarah Sherburne, who was serving with the town of Truckee.
Thank you so much, Katie. And really awesome presentations, everyone. It's great to learn at the end what you all have accomplished from what I've been hearing throughout the year. So congratulations. My service, as Katie mentioned, was at the town of Truckee with our sustainability department called Keep Truckee Green. And my service covered a pretty wide range of projects, including municipal fleet and sustainable purchasing policies, work on our climate action plan. But for this waste group presentation, I chose to focus on just one waste specific project and do sort of a deeper dive. And so that is on a food recovery program that we established in Truckee and the associated SB 1383 preparations. And as many of you, I think, are familiar with, SB 1383 is a bill that seeks to reduce organic food waste or organic waste in general, and thereby methane reduction and thereby reducing methane emissions. And the related food recovery goal encompassed by SB 1383 is to increase edible food recovery by 20% by 2025. And the role that jurisdictions play in that is ensuring compliance, understanding the food recovery landscape in their jurisdiction, and expanding food recovery capacity where possible. And so this is a bit of a specific program, but also has generalizable lessons as well. So for an overview with the structure of the program, based on organizational knowledge, when I came in at the beginning of my service year, we knew that there was a bread wholesaler in Truckee that was landfilling large quantities of their edible bread each day, bread that was not being sold at the grocery store just because of demand. And so through extensive communications with that wholesaler, we set up a program where Keep Truckee Green recruits volunteers from the community to pick up those surplus loaves from Truckee Sourdough 2 times a week and deliver them to the local nonprofit that does food distributions in the community twice a week. And so that was an effort to increase the nonprofit's capacity, since they're strapped with volunteers and truck capacity and all of those things, and basically serve as a pilot project and say, okay, where can we as a jurisdiction step in and try to solve some of these problems that exist with both food waste and also food insecurity and hunger in the community. So the outcomes of that program so far, and it's an ongoing program, are that when I wrote this, over 8,000 pounds of bread recovered, and that's almost 10,000 now. And that covers about 90% of Truckee Sourdough's edible food waste that was occurring before. And that 10% is sort of a required buffer for them based on fluctuations in demand. And then this was also my volunteer engagement activity. So it has involved over 62 volunteers over more than now 69 hours. And down the line, we're hoping to expand the scope of this program, which we branded as Feed Truckee, and branded it to be in line with our Keep Truckee Green brand, to include other food generators. And food generators include grocery stores, wholesalers, restaurants, all of those things. And so part of being able to do that is first understanding what the capacity is in your community and what the potential is to increase that capacity, and if there's the need to increase that capacity. And so throughout the year, I've also been getting to know and interviewing and gathering information from the organizations that already deal with food recovery in the Truckee area. And there are about 6 of those that deal with food recovery in some capacity. And so through using some CalRecycle resources that are provided to jurisdictions for SB 1383 preparation, I sent out a survey to gather information on how much food people are currently, or these organizations are currently recovering, who specifically they are recovering food from, and from that you can infer who is not already donating food in the community and what limitations there are on their capacity, if they want or have plans to increase capacity in the future, and what they would need to do that. Katie, you can go to the next slide. And so a couple of best practices in both SB 1383 preparation and volunteer management in general. Recruiting those volunteers was an initial social media push using basically all of our available resources. And then once the program was up and running, providing really, really clear communication was probably the most important thing, in the form of videos, in the form of phone calls to new volunteers before their shift, just saying, hey, do you have any questions? This is the process. And that was kind of a theme throughout this entire project, with clear communication being like the most important part with all stakeholders, and gathering data from those volunteers as well. And then, as I mentioned, utilizing some of those SB 1383 resources provided by CalRecycle, and continuing to expand this knowledge will be really important for us as a jurisdiction as we strive to increase food recovery capacity down the line, and tackle other facets of SB 1383 as well. So, thank you.
Awesome. Great job, Sarah. And great photos. So congratulations. And I did have a question, kind of what's the story behind how you guys chose the bread company? And were there any like barriers to getting them on board with the program?
Yes. So it was kind of interesting because the town of Truckee had attempted to work with this particular organization in the past, and they had been a little bit curmudgeonly and resistant to that. And so I came in with my site already having that knowledge that they had been difficult to work with in the past, and that this was something that we wanted to tackle. And I think that it definitely helped that SB 1383 is a requirement. So you can use that as some leverage and be like, hey, you're actually going to have to donate your food, and we can help make that super easy for you. And it's in their best interest to do that. And we did at the outset have that initial resistance and them kind of putting up a lot of barriers like, well, how are we want it to be a no contact delivery, and we pack the bread at 6 a.m. So can the volunteer come at 6 a.m. and we don't have anything to put the bread in and all this stuff. So it just sort of required a lot of troubleshooting and chatting with them, and then waiting for them to chat with their people and get back to me. And it was sort of a process, but ended up working out.
Sarah, 400 pounds is a lot. I'm wondering if there are like systemic solutions that can be implemented to kind of, not just for this particular wholesaler, but other wholesalers. Are there systemic solutions that can be implemented to reduce that overage?
Yeah, I would imagine. So it's kind of an issue within the entire food system. It's not really a demand-based food system. And it's the same thing with farmers growing food. They're growing just like a lot of food to make sure they have enough for however much will be demanded down the line. And so I think ultimately it is just a broken food system. And I would imagine that there are ways that could be more efficiently managed. But yeah, I don't know. This is a solution for the time being, and hopefully it's something that we won't even need when we make our operations even more efficient.
Yeah, great. I think we have a question from Dominique.
Yeah, Sarah, I was curious. So preventing the food waste has huge environmental benefits from all those resources conserved, but it also has benefit of fighting food insecurity. I was curious if you had a read on what your volunteers were, why they were invested in the program and why they were coming to participate.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think that something that would be cool down the line is to get more of that volunteer feedback, especially because of COVID. It has been a pretty removed program, like from the volunteers themselves, I would say. But I would imagine that many of them have some kind of interest in either helping feed the community or fight food waste. Yeah, and we've had a number of volunteers that have come to be really consistent and reliable and seem to like participating. So
that's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, wonderful work, Sarah. And I love the creativity and those solutions that you and your team were able to come up with. So congratulations again. Okay, so our last presenter is Caitlin Reese, who served with the San Francisco Department of the Environment. Nope. Sorry, everyone. Let's see. Pause. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Okay.
Getting the alternate view.
I know. Okay, there we go. How's that? Okay, we're back.
We've got Sarah's. Yep,
There we go.
there it is.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Katie. My name is Caitlin Reese, and today I will be talking about the work I've done with surplus building materials at San Francisco's Department of the Environment. So I'll provide some brief policy context, explain what exactly surplus is, talk about some of the research and outreach we've done with key stakeholders, and then finish with what our next steps are. So to give a little bit of background, San Francisco is pretty advanced and has had an ordinance in place since 2006 that requires all construction and demolition waste to be recycled rather than going straight to the landfill. But despite this ordinance, some C&D practices are still leading to landfill. Next slide, please. So looking at this diagram, we can see all of the different avenues of the construction process, beginning with the extraction of raw materials to manufacture, then design, construction, use, and eventually what happens at the end of a material's life after initial use. So as you can see, there are many different opportunities to improve this process, but I'm just going to be talking about one example today, which is surplus, circled at the bottom left. So we define surplus as materials acquired for construction projects, but never actually installed. As you can see in the diagram, surplus materials completely bypass the use stage after construction, but there is still opportunity for recovery and resale rather than just disposal. So why focus on surplus out of this whole diagram? Previously, surplus was kind of an invisible material because subcontractors are responsible for the materials that they bring to a site. And then these materials would leave in waves over the course of the project. So they were kind of invisible. And then a few years ago, there was a general contractor working on a project in the city who had the intuition to request that subcontractors leave these materials on site to let them build up over the course of the project. And at the end of the project, there were quite literally tons or several floors of sub-basement parking filled with unused materials that were left over. And they started letting these materials build up more than halfway through the project. So likely there could have been even more material. And because they accumulated these materials, they were able to send them to climate refugees who were recovering from natural disasters in Northern California and Mexico, rather than them possibly being sent to landfill. So in combination with this index case, and then also we heard anecdotally from industry partners that surplus materials were an issue, but we wanted to learn more specifically about what causes the generation of surplus, how abundant and common it is on projects, how it could be reduced, and how these unused materials could be repurposed once the surplus has already been generated. Next slide, please. So in order to do this, we developed and distributed 2 surveys, one for contractors and another for designers, asking about their experience with surplus. And for contractors, they're really the ones who are hands-on with these materials. So it was a pretty in-depth survey that involved a spreadsheet in which we asked respondents to list specifically what materials they see as surplus, the typical amount of overage, the typical reasons for ordering the surplus, and their typical solutions, as well as a few other details. Next slide, please. And we heard back from 23 contractors and 20 designers. And this chart here gives an overview of what we heard from contractors in terms of their existing solutions that they're already implementing. So the 4 most common solutions for surplus in order are to first store materials for future use, which made up around 27%. Then to discard as the second most common, which is about 24%. Then to transfer materials to the project owner or client at the end of the project at around 18%. And fourth, to redirect the materials to use on another project without storing at all in between. And that was about 16%. And I just want to note that I'm focusing on contractor responses because contractors, as I mentioned, are much more hands-on with the materials, and we use the responses from designers primarily to just round out our understanding of the information provided from contractors. Next slide, please. So that was really just a snapshot of what we learned from the survey responses, and more in-depth findings will be shared in a final report to be completed this fall. And the report, in addition to the findings from the surveys, also includes an overview of strategies to address surplus through both prevention as well as redistribution. And so to support these redistribution and material reuse efforts, the city is also launching an online materials exchange platform in partnership with Reaply, and also a revamp of the city's physical reuse center, which is called Building Resources. And we're also collaborating with the city's Office of Economic and Workforce Development to do outreach to local and BIPOC-owned businesses, as well as other priority groups about the online materials exchange to ensure that the platform is accessible and that these materials end up in the hands of those who will benefit from them the most. And I'm excited to share that I'll be returning to the department as a second-year fellow. So I'll be able to take everything that I've learned throughout the research and outreach regarding surplus materials over the last 11 months and continue to build capacity of the department through these next steps of implementation. Next slide, please. And that is all. So thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to Civic Spark and especially Eden, my site supervisor, for all of the support. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, congratulations, Caitlin. Great presentation, and excited to have you back again next year with San Francisco. Cool. And I love the integration of the tech world into this project, and there's an app for that. Awesome. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question? Okay, well, I would just like to say that I'm quite shocked that that 24% of it just got thrown away. That just seems like ridiculous.
That is amazing. Caitlin, do you and anybody at your agency anticipate that that will change given the rise in building material expenses?
That's a good question. We did hear from some of the survey respondents that they are starting to reuse materials. So if they have leftovers from one project, looking to use them on another project. And unfortunately, some materials are really project specific, and it's hard to reuse those materials on another project. But that is definitely part of our recommendation of how to limit the amount of materials going to landfill. And hopefully the online materials exchange platform will help with that. But yeah, there, especially with the backlogging of supply chains from COVID, I know that building materials have been becoming much more expensive. So it will be interesting to see how those impacts last in the future.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, thank you everyone who attended, and congratulations to our Waste Not, Want Not fellows, doing some really great work, not always the most glamorous, but super critical in our fight to, stop climate change from, getting as bad as it could. And this is awesome. This is kind of like the forefront of the climate movement, and especially in California, really focusing on waste and just some really exciting work. I agree with Simone's comment about your projects. Okay, well, we'll close there a little bit early, and thank you to everyone in our audience that came today and participated. And we'll be sharing out a recording on our YouTube page after the event is over. So yeah, you're invited to
Katie.
this again.
Oh,
What's up?
You got it. I was going to be like, before we close, we should invite people to graduation, but then you started doing it. I'm sorry. Go for it.
Yeah. We have more poster symposium sessions this week and next week. And then our graduation will be at the end of July. And you can find more information on our website at civicspark.lgc.org. Okay. Take care, everyone, and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Alrighty.